and therefore the district, have in effect policies and procedures to ensure that all children with disabilities residing in the state, including children ages 3 through 5, are located, evaluated, identified, and served. Here you will see the mandate, again noting that as a district, we must follow this mandate. And because of this, we are constantly seeing new children who are suspected of having a disability. There are new notifications and referrals that come to our office on a daily basis from a variety of different sources, which we will explore in greater detail in just a few minutes. Therefore, as children are identified, this means that the placements into schools and into services occur all year long. And this graphic indicates the essential elements of our child find process. The process of child find also relies heavily on established community and family partnerships that allow referring agencies like private child care centers and pediatricians to notify our office when a child is suspected of having a disability. We also work really hard to ensure that families are heard and supported throughout the IEP process. We are aware that this process does feel overwhelming to families, so this school year we are actually offering some sessions where families can learn all about the process from start to finish. This process also involves a multidisciplinary evaluation team consisting of a case manager, a teacher, psychologist, speech-language pathologist, and other professionals and related service providers. Then once a child is found eligible for services, we make an assignment according to the decision of the IEP team in order to offer the child a free and appropriate public education, otherwise known as FAPE. This process leads to students receiving targeted services based on their needs and also prepares them for the transition to kindergarten. To complete this work, each and every day, we have our multidisciplinary evaluation teams. As noted earlier, in addition to the case manager, team teacher, psychologist, speech-language pathologist, often a child also requires other professionals like occupational therapists, physical therapists, audiologists, and even at times social workers. In this configuration, it is noted the high levels of cross-departmental collaboration occurring across OEL, special education services, and counseling and student services. Once children move through the referral, evaluation, and eligibility processes, children are placed and served in a variety of different ways. We do provide direct services to students in classrooms, both in general education and special education programs, as well as through our itinerant and speech services. So in addition to our 186 classrooms, we do also have 34 itinerant teachers serving in 268 child care and home locations in our county, with a total of 588 students being served at the end of last school year in this model. Our speech services occur in homes and speech sites, child care centers, and groups. At the end of last year, we had 18 speech-language therapists serving 714 students. Again, the level of service an individual child receives is determined by the IEP team. It's based on the needs and the strengths of the child, as well as how much service and where those services need to be delivered in order for that child to show adequate progress. This, again, is based on our federal and state requirements. So now we're going to dive into some data related to child find. So as we look at this data, in the 2023-2024 school year, we had a total of 3,264 students referred to our office suspected of having a disability. The majority of those referrals came from third-party providers, such as physicians, social workers, DHHS, community agencies, and private child cares. So as you can see in that first column, about 46% of our notifications came from these sources. In the middle column, you can see that about 30% of our notifications came from the Child Developmental Services Agency, or the CDSA. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has a provision that's called Part C, which is a program that covers early intervention services for children birth through 2. We are fortunate in Wake County to have a really strong working relationship with our CDSA, where we together support each other in honoring our own policies and regulations while also meeting the needs of our families and our students. You can see in that last column that our family notifications account for about 23% of our notifications, which is when a family reaches out to our office directly to request the referral process to begin. I just want to highlight that first column and point out that our community partnerships are essential to our operations. You can see that 46% is a large percentage of where our notifications come from. So we are really grateful for those partnerships. To provide a visual representation, this graph shows trend data over time. We can obviously see that dip during COVID-impacted years, but then we see that steady increase. We have, just for the record, surpassed all historic numbers to date for the number of referrals as well as the total number of students that are evaluated and then eventually served. You can see here about 1,000 student increase since the 1920 school year. We also continue to see growth in all functions of our work, specifically related to our child find growth. Over the last several years, we've seen an average annual increase of 11% for the number of children that are being referred. And last school year, we experienced a 10% increase in those referrals. Further, we experienced a 17% increase in students found eligible for services and served when you compare the 2022-23 April child count to the 23-24 April child count. Again, these numbers suggest significant growth and need for continued services, particularly in preschool special education. Many of you have seen this 5-year plan in previous presentations to the Board of Education and county commissioners. This is a graphic representation of our 5-year plan. And as we look at this current year, we have 186 classrooms. Based on our data, we need an additional 6 classrooms for the 25-26 school year. We were provided 1-year funding for the 24-25 school year. When we begin budget development for the 25-26 school year, we will need to include those funds for continuation and the growth funds. This means in our business cases for this year, we will need to account for the 6 additional classrooms and also for these 1-year funded positions from this year in order to accommodate the students that are being identified and that we are required to serve. So I will now pass it to Dawn Dawson, Senior Director of the Office of Early Learning, as we celebrate and we look ahead.
So as we transition, we're going to really focus on supporting the growth that we just described and what that data shows, as well as sharing a success story. So as you heard, based on our data that you've seen in this presentation, we are requesting to add an additional 6 pre-K classrooms for the 25-26 school year. So that is something based on data that we are requesting. We will also continue to our cross-departmental collaboration with Special Education Services, CAS, and other departments, because we really do collaborate across all kinds of departments. In addition, we are really proud of our community partnerships. You heard some of the examples that Jenna gave and saw those numbers, but we would not be able to do this work without them. The relationships that we have with our community partners are essential with those agencies. So continuing to build those relationships, deepen those relationships, that's really important to us. And then lastly, we know that oftentimes we are the first interaction that a family has with the school system. There's a lot of power in that. So it's really important for us to make sure those families feel welcome, that they feel supported, and that we really do assist them in navigating through the process So that is something we're proud of. Is very important to us, that family engagement, and we do continue to enhance that family support, as well as we're always open to feedback. Like we even have a family advisory council, for example. So speaking of families, as we move into that, we would love to highlight this story that we have from Annie Aaron today, and this is a success story. I'm not gonna go into too much detail because I want her to tell her story. So I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dawn. It's an honor to share our story. My name is Annie Aaron. I'm a proud mom of 3 exceptional little boys here in Wake County. My husband and I moved to North Carolina almost 8 years ago, and we feel really lucky to have ended up in Raleigh, where all 3 of our sons have benefited from our county's commitment to its youngest learners. Today, I have the honor of sharing how the services provided by the Wake County Public School System changed the trajectory of my middle son's life. Early in his first year of preschool, at age 3, our son Bobby was displaying some atypical behaviors that were red flags for his seasoned teacher. He was very rigid and inflexible, had difficulties transitioning between activities, and was prone to intense tantrums. Because of the outreach that Project Enlightenment does with local centers and other community partners, the staff at his small school knew that an on-site observation would be the next logical step. We could not believe that this service would be completely free to us and had no idea that it was just scratching the surface of the breadth and quality of the services that our district offers families. A series of screenings, meetings, and evaluations took place over the next several months. We were initially seen at Project Enlightenment in November, and Bobby had an IEP that included in-school services provided by an itinerant teacher and occupational therapist in place by April. Though it was unfamiliar territory for me as a parent, I was incredibly lucky to have the guidance of a phenomenal teacher or parent consultant who still keeps in touch even 3 years later, and highly skilled professionals all along the way. I was continuously impressed not only by the efficiency and expertise of the staff that we encountered throughout our journey, which included psychologists, case managers, speech and occupational therapists, but also their true dedication to improving outcomes and helping families. I can say with the utmost confidence that Project Enlightenment is a jewel in the crown of Wake County schools. Research and anecdotal evidence alike show us that young children are such an important population to serve. Addressing needs early and quickly allows for the building of a strong foundation for learning. That absolutely was the case for our family, and we will be forever grateful for the gift that was given to us. The path forged by Project Enlightenment ultimately led us to the Early Learning Center at Memory Road. After securing an IEP, we were lucky enough that Bobby was selected to be a part of the ELC's inaugural class. I have to say, the time I've been given to speak here isn't nearly enough to talk about how important and impactful the work being done there is. The value of a state-of-the-art facility filled with dedicated educators, all committed to helping children learn and grow, can't be overstated. What Bobby needed as he began at the ELC in 2023 was help regulating big feelings and managing his behaviors, even more than he needed to learn how to read. Thankfully, because of our school system, he got both. He flourished under the loving care at the ELC and is thriving in kindergarten as a result of their hard work. Bobby started this year ahead of the game because he received a carefully tailored curriculum that more than adequately prepared him for the rigor of kindergarten. He also was given an arsenal of non-academic skills that are helping him manage daily life in a classroom full of his peers. Early intervention through Wake County's made all the difference for Bobby and for our family. Having an IEP not only outlines his struggles but also highlights his strengths has given me so much peace of mind as a parent. He's a brilliant and sweet child who needs a little bit of extra help assimilating socially. I can't imagine having sent him to kindergarten without the additional support and clear-cut plan that an IEP offers. And of course, that wouldn't have existed without the services that he's received over the years. The fact that many of these services are unique to Wake County has always told me that this is a place that values its young children. We know plenty of friends in neighboring counties who don't have access to this same level of incredible resources. Our son qualified for county's preschool based solely on his needs, but we know that widespread access to preschool improves outcomes for students and their families, period. I am grateful that Wake County knows this to be the case and is working to extend its reach by opening more preschool classrooms. Thank you.
And at this time, we open it up for any questions that you guys may have.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this topic with us and really diving into some success stories. And thank you, Ms. Aaron, for sharing your story and for being here and showing us, and showing not just us, but Wake County, why we must invest in early childhood education and why it's a priority. So thank you, and I'll just go around the table for questions. Yes, sir, Chair Hackett.
Thank you. Again, to echo Chair Swanson's comments. Thank you for coming and sharing your story, and for everybody for the presentation. And I apologize for missing just the first minute of it. But I'm curious, for programs like this, where does the funding come from? I know that we've got a variety of pre-K programs and there's a variety of different pots, but like with the Early Learning Center, for example, versus programs at Project Enlightenment, how much of that is accessible through state funds versus the funds we get from the county versus grants or other funding that's out there?
I'm happy to respond to that. So it is definitely a combination. So we have Title I funding that's federal funded. We do have some federal, state, and local special ed funding as well. Honestly, that amount coming from federal and state for preschool special ed does not adequately fund the level of support we need based on our data. So that has not caught up. We also utilize NC Pre-K. So we do have a number of classrooms that we utilize, and NC Pre-K is the state program, and we do have classrooms that are licensed NC Pre-K where students dually qualify. So they came through Title I or maybe through special ed, but they also qualify based on income. So we do have some of those funds as well, and they're considered grant funds. They come from through Wake County Smart Start, so it is a variety of funding sources.
And you said Wake County Smart Start is the administrator?
So NC Pre-K is at the state level, and then the local agency that administers the program and that we go through, there's a vetting process where centers apply and we apply, and Wake County Smart Start is the agency that decides how many slots we will receive. And we always try to maximize those slots when at all possible, and oftentimes when they're not able to fill all of their slots in child care centers, they will give those additional slots to us as well. And that's something that we value and appreciate, because that does help us turn around and utilize those dollars for additional staff and classrooms.
Yes, sir.
And so to continue on that, it sounds like you never know from year to year what might be available because you don't know what might be going to
Correct.
other providers. Do you have an estimate, or do you know what the demand for seats in the program would be that we're unable to fund or unable to provide seats for?
So do you want the fund, just for clarification, so the funding or the number of seats?
The way I'm thinking about it is more in terms of number of seats. That's a little more personal. Is this something that if we had the capacity, could we open and fill another early learning center? Or would it just be another school-based program? Or how would we best use those funds?
So let me help you better answer that question. So talk about the number of seats that are available through, let's say, NC Pre-K, because that's a percentage that we get and what we can fund, versus if we go through whatever child find activity that's just identifying what kids will qualify, how many actually qualify for services, and how many positions are actually funded. Now with the EC 3.5, doesn't matter how many people are out there. If they qualify, we have to fund them, and we'll get the funding at the next head count. But any of those other programs, it's kind of up to us about how we fund, and that's based on the number of seats that we think is available. And so you will know a lot about NC Pre-K in Wake County and the number of seats that are funded versus what we know is available.
So, thank you, Dr. Taylor. So currently, the range has been from NC Pre-K 336 slots to around, it varies, like I said, because sometimes they will give us additional slots to 376, 382. It does range, and there are requirements related to that there be that they go through a child care licensure process, student attendance. So it is a little more complicated, but we have been very committed to making that work because we do want those additional funds. The challenge is that we are at a point with those NC Pre-K funds that we're maximizing those already, because we have already embedded and used those to add additional classrooms to support along the way. And so they have a limited pool at the state level. So when Wake County Smart Start delegates, they also have to honor their process of child care providers, also having that option to apply. But every cycle, we always add additional schools and classrooms to be part of the process. So that is something that we have been committed to. Regarding your question about how many additional students we need to serve, when we do the calculations, it's literally, I would say the minimum is 6 additional classrooms. So, and the classrooms range from, I'm going to say 12 to 18. And I would say that we are being conservative with that, because you saw that growth, the level of growth that thank you, the level of growth that we're seeing. As Jenna said, it really is unprecedented, and it was always, like, we were trending this way for even prior to COVID, I would say for the last 8-9 years, but because of COVID, it has even intensified. Because those students haven't, like, think about the age where they are, these kids now that were born during that time, and they may not have been, their disability may not have been identified early on, and typically it would have been. They may not have had opportunities to be with other children to build some of those social skills, or a parent may not know that there was an issue because they didn't have the opportunity to be with other children. So there's a variety of reasons for it, but that has been the trend. It's now more intense than ever. Does that answer?
And the number of slots that we get from a Smart Start.
300, the range is typically 336, but sometimes it goes up to about 370 if we receive additional. If they like, I can give you a specific example. They had a couple of child care centers that for whatever reason they could not find a teacher or a different situation, so those were going to be not utilized. So they offer those to us, and we say absolutely, and we work to fill those slots. So we do have a really strong relationship with Wake County Smart Start, which is one of the things that we are proud of, our partnerships.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that, as you talked about, that comes down from the state. They will designate how many slots every county, if you will, gets. And so part of the problem that many people have is that they may have the slots, they may have the children that will qualify, but they don't have appropriate, I'll call them child-find activities to identify those kids. So a lot of districts have them and don't fill them all. So it's good to know that in Wake County we're maximizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're identifying beyond the seats that we have at this point.
And that's what I was wondering, because it seems like, you look at the rate of student growth, but then you look at the rate of referrals, and the referrals are far outpacing the growth, either because, identification has improved and is more intense, or for whatever other reasons, the need seems to be growing faster than our capacity.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're welcome. Vice Chair Johnson, one question. Ms. Evans?
Thank you. We get a lot of, this is not new, but a lot of families that are in our pre-K program are at a particular school, and then they can't stay at that school because the services are different in different places, et cetera. Are y'all exploring, or do you continue to be in conversation with student assignment to try to resolve that, or is it really something that's not resolvable?
So we collaborate with student assignment a lot, and I would say that when that's possible, that really is the goal. And sometimes there are additional challenges, but that is our goal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously we work closely with facilities as well to know where we can have spots. And then when we're thinking about what classroom types are at each individual school, we also try to be strategic about that. For example, if we can open 2 pre-K classrooms, perhaps we open a self-contained and a blended so that children may have a natural maturation, through an IEP team decision to be in general ed before they remain there for kindergarten. But we've also been very clear with families that, unfortunately, it's not something that we can promise for students who stay there for kindergarten, that they do need to exercise the student assignment processes, but we certainly consider that. And we look at base school intensely for every single student as we place them. So we do attempt to make that happen to the maximum extent that we can.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be sure to reach out to our representatives about expanding.
But remind me.
But it's something, we do get a lot of questions about. And then knowing who the different funding partners are, who's interested in it.
I know, I saw on YouTube. It's great. Hey, we met last year. I had an honor to go to your round table. Thank you. Thank you for serving us. I appreciate it.
Which was also an issue for me before 3 school.
Thank you. Nice to meet y'all.
Well, they appear to have a whole bunch of money
Yes.
for private school vouchers. Maybe you can tap into some of that.
Yeah, let's see. I gotta make,
For the opportunity.
of course, good to see you too, Dawn. And I know you're glad I didn't have questions today, but I feel like I've learned all the years. I know. I knew you would be shocked. I knew you'd be
Have a
shocked.
comment.
Actually, Chris had already asked my questions. So. Our next presentation, Beyond the Numbers, this is really about reimagining attendance solutions and support. I'm sure you've heard a lot about attendance issues and challenges, and we want to begin to dig deeper into what can be done. And so we want to highlight and share today Michael Pesch and Michelle Woodson, kind of some of the work that we have planned for digging into attendance. That we hope to share and analyze some data that reflects some of our attendance challenges, highlight our current attendance support structures and services, and examine new innovative strategies aimed at addressing chronic attendance. And we'll highlight chronic attendance and we'll define it in the presentation. And then discuss the shared accountability and collaborative solutions that we can put in place between district office, families, and schools to really be able to address chronic attendance. This presentation and the work that we have planned underway really aligns to goal number 4, attendance, to ensure by 2028, 95% of all students are in attendance, at least 95% of their membership days. And so Michael will explain membership days and chronic attendance, just so we're all on the same page about this goal and kind of the work in which we're doing. And so, Michael?
Afternoon. Good to see everybody again, and very excited to be here today to talk about school attendance. So, wanted to start with this slide, and just to point out kind of some things that sometimes you take for granted and when people miss school. So, if you were to miss on average 2 days a month, that would be 20 school days each year, and then over the course of time, that would be an entire year of instruction that's missed by graduation. Double that, 4 days a month, and of course, then you're looking at missed 2 years of instruction. And we'll be revisiting these data points in just a minute. So we want to look at a couple of other data points. There's a growing body of research that is showing that there is a distinct link between chronic absenteeism and student performance. There's also, though, some growing research that is showing that there's ways to combat that and be able to monitor and address the issues that are underlying chronic absenteeism. Just taking a look at this slide right here, we have 17% of chronically absent students achieve grade level reading by the 8th grade. And in the 3rd grade, reading proficiency, chronic absenteeism in early grades is linked to significantly lower reading proficiency by the 3rd grade. And students who attend regularly are 30% more likely to graduate on time. I think it's important that we make sure that we understand what we're talking about when we're talking about chronic absenteeism and truancy. Truancy is the term that we have heard and used for decades, and that is, in North Carolina, when you have 10 or more unexcused absences. We are starting to shift our vocabulary and looking at chronic absenteeism, which is excused and unexcused days when you're missing 10% or more of all enrolled days, so not just a cumulative number, but when you reach a certain point, but 10% of your enrolled days. I want to take a look at these graphics here to show you kind of what it looked like in the nation, state, and our county pre- and post-pandemic. So right before the pandemic, on a national level, 16% of students were chronically absent, and then after the pandemic, we saw that shoot up to 30% of students who were chronically absent right after the pandemic in the 21-22 school year when we returned in person. In North Carolina, we mirrored those national numbers at around 15% of students being chronically absent before the pandemic. And in North Carolina, 31% of those students in North Carolina became chronically absent. In Wake County, 15% were chronically absent before the pandemic. And we, I would say, did a great job when we came back because we were well below what the nation and the state was looking at. We were at 22.51. That is still a very troubling number after the pandemic. Here's where we were last year. So we dropped just a little bit more, and we were at 19.68% for all students who were chronically absent in Wake County Public Schools. As you can see, there was a disparity here between our brown and black students. At 25% of those students were chronically absent, and then our white and Asian students, on average, were around 13%. Still well above the 10% that would be seen as chronically absent and above our 5% goal that we're shooting for with our district goal. We know that students do not miss school just to miss school. There is always an underlying issue. We got some research from Attendance Works, who has collected this over the last decade or so, and they have put it into 4 categories. As you see, barriers, aversion, disengagement, and misconceptions. And if you just take a quick look, barriers, of course, we're used to seeing students get ill. We can mitigate that as much as possible with getting immunizations or medication or getting people treated, but there's always going to be illnesses, and that's acute and chronic illnesses. We also have family responsibilities that students have to manage at home. There's trauma, lack of transportation, lack of housing. Those are some of the examples of barriers. When we look at aversion, we're looking now at students who are not wanting to come to school for different reasons, such as they're struggling academically. They're having a hard time in school. It's hard to get ahead, so they stay home. There's also issues with school climate or social challenges. We know that bullying, for example, has come up quite a bit, and that has changed over the course of decades. It's not something that only happens at school anymore. It's something that happens 24/7. With social media, and so that's a big reason for students to not want to come to school. Anxiety, biased discipline practices, and even parents' negative school experiences that they have that then is part of the students' thinking and behavior. With disengagement, we have students who become bored in school. There may be a lack of challenging instruction, lack of connections to adults in the building, lack of the supports that they need for behaviors and academics, lack of credits. Once they start matriculating up and they're getting into the higher levels, if they start doing the math and it starts becoming very, very hard for them, that's where we start seeing some of the dropouts, or needing to work and support their family financially. This last category of misconceptions is interesting. We talked about that slide at the beginning. Only missing 2 days a month is not that big of a deal, and when you add that up, you see it has quite an impact. Only unexcused absences are an issue. It's okay if we have excused, and that gets back to our truancy versus our chronic absence mindset. The absences only matter when you're in the older grades. It's not so much of an issue in kindergarten and first grade. We see a lot of students who are missing in kindergarten, and this is where the habits are being formed. So it's critical that we have good attendance even at the elementary level. And there is a way of thinking that suspensions aren't absences because the school is asking them to not come to school, but those are days that students miss instructional time. So I want to talk a little bit now about what our current attendance support practices are for attendance. Again, I'm going to go back to the North Carolina Compulsory School Attendance Law. This has been in place since 1955. There have been some changes over time to it, but it, for the most part, looks the same. And it says that if you're between the ages of 7 and 16 years of age, you are required to be in school. If you have too many unexcused absences, and that number is 10, the parents and guardians could face criminal charges for truancy. So this is what has been guiding most of the attendance work that has been done across the state and in the nation. But there is some shifting now to looking at chronic absences. Most of the strategies with this are to find out who the students are who are missing those 10 or more unexcused. If you decided that you wanted to do court as a strategy or an intervention. There aren't enough courtrooms and court days to handle all of the days that would be needed to process these cases. I'm not saying that we don't. We do this for the most egregious cases, but there's not the capacity in our criminal court system to handle this. And again, this is criminal cases that we would be taking out against the parents. We do have a court alternative program which provides mediation to families who are about to enter the court system, and that's a last attempt to try to make some improvements before we do take them through the court system. So this is what has been guided most of the interventions that we've had for many, many decades, not just in this county, but many others in North Carolina. So some of the things that we're doing here to manage school attendance is that we have the use of school-based attendance team meetings. These teams meet regularly to review lists of students who are chronically absent. The teams meet to develop individual intensive interventions, group supports, school-wide interventions, and incentives to decrease school absences, which we have listed in our newly developed, a couple years ago, standard treatment protocol that we use, just like we do for reading and math and some other areas. We also have families engaged through not just the notification system, which is required by law. We have to send the letters out when they reach 3, 6, and 10 unexcused days. But we also are doing targeted messages to them, mostly through talking points. It has been a great tool to be able to engage families and help them learn more about why their student needs to be in school. We are tracking our data through the PowerSchool system, not only monitoring those who are again, unexcused, but who are also chronically absent. And we talked about the court alternative program that is used, as well as Child Protective Services. We can make educational neglect reports, but there's a high threshold for being able to do that, and court is one of those steps that we have to follow. And of course, we rely heavily on the vast bank of information and knowledge from the Attendance Works folks who have been helping us for well over 10 years. And they provide interventions and strategies to schools and all kinds of resources that they can use on a regular basis. So as we talk about making that switch from truancy to chronic absences, I just wanted to share this quote, and this also comes from Attendance Works. Research shows that chronic absence is highly correlated with trauma. The more a child has had adverse child experiences, the more likely they are to miss school. And most often, an empathic restorative response aimed at addressing the underlying barriers yields better attendance results. So that takes us to where we're headed and the innovative and collaborative attendance strategies that we're looking at with Wake County Public School System. We've begun taking some steps, and the first is to make a shift from looking at it from a truancy focus to a chronic absenteeism focus. We're helping staff across the district and helping students and families to have a more collaborative approach, emphasizing support over punishment. The first step in this was to revise our attendance letters. We did a revision during the pandemic just to kind of make them a little bit more friendly. But this has been a very different revision, and we now the letter is more collaborative, asking them to come in for help, giving them the information they need about why their child needs to be there. Not just quoting the law. We are required to put that general statute in there, but it's a minor part of the letter now instead of the most prominent part. Within the school, we're looking closely at the climate and culture, what's communicated by individuals to families, what larger positive messages are being shared with the school community. And again, we're using talking points to do this, to be able to communicate and educate the families. We are also making a more concerted effort to collaborate with our community partners and with each other. We now have a uniform agenda for our attendance teams that we use that has never been done before. And the attendance teams now, instead of looking only at those unexcused absences, it is structured in a way that they're looking at data first, and then they're looking at breaking down that data and trying to determine what they can also do at a core level instead of just at an intensive level. And we are also very data-driven. We've created a custom chronic absence report that the schools have started using this year. And we've also created a district-level attendance work group that has been overseeing the work that we're doing towards meeting the district goal. So one of the biggest things that we have coming up on the horizon is we're going to be partnering with Attendance Works. The schools have been informed about this, and they're going to be getting some more details about what this is. This is for a diagnostic that we're going to be doing to learn what works well and what needs to be improved in the way in which we deal with attendance. So a little bit about Attendance Works. It's a non-profit initiative that supports school districts, communities, and states with addressing chronic absenteeism through positive, evidence-based problem-solving approaches. Their work is grounded in understanding and addressing educational-based inequities. They will work with us to provide expert guidance, resources, and evidence-based strategies to reduce our chronic absenteeism in the district. So what we want to do now is talk a little bit about what that diagnostic will include and the timeline for that. So we just got them going with us in October, and as you can see here, the timeline will take us from October to March. The first few phases through December will focus on the collection of data through surveys and interviews. In January, the data will be compiled by March, and the results and recommendations will be presenting to our working group and to the superintendent, with the final step being to provide the results to the district. The diagnostic will not give us, it will give us some resources and recommendations, but nothing that we can implement immediately without building a plan and incorporate it into the next school year. So this is a process for us. The interviews and the focus groups will be going from central services to principals and also at the teacher level. They've been very careful about making sure that they're considering all regions, all different types of schools, and having a good sample of all staff across the district to be able to get a good picture for us. So at this time, I'd like to see what questions you might have about this.
Thank you so much for sharing this information with us, and I'll just go around the table and see if there's any questions. I'll start on this side with Ms. Evans.
No, just to say that it's exciting, and I know it's, something we've touched on before with the spike since the pandemic. So I'm excited to see it. I know y'all are excited to tackle it, and so thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. I want to echo Ms. Edmonds' comments. We've seen the spike in the numbers, and we know this has to be a priority issue, and I appreciate you highlighting the links between attendance and performance.
Mm-hmm.
But we see in proficiency scores, for example. Where I have some questions, I guess they rise from two areas. There were multiple factors that were identified involved in absenteeism. And I was wondering, has there been work or analysis in terms of how you weight each of those factors? Because some obviously must be either, have a greater impact on an individual student, and then others might have greater impact system-wide, right? So with all those many factors, do you know what are principal factors or area places we might start to address?
So that's one of the things that Attendance Works is going to try to help us with, because they're not just looking at how do we manage attendance, but they're looking at all of the academic scores. They're looking at our acuity model. They're looking at all of our behavioral health needs assessments, threat assessments, everything, how we use MTSS model in dealing with not just attendance but academics. So they know that with our entire county, every region has their own unique needs and issues and resources. So one of the things that we have on the agenda is for the team that's assembled at the school to pull that data and start breaking it down to see what is it at their school that is standing out. We know there may be 10 things that show up, but what is it that's going to have the biggest payoff, and what is it that they feel like they can really kind of work on to start getting some traction with it. So it's going to look different from school to school, and we've been dealing with that and providing that consultation to schools to try to look at the data and develop a hypothesis about what they can deal with at that level.
And to build on that leads to, I guess, my next question about some uncertainty. We talk about working with Attendance Works to develop strategies. But strategies can mean so many different things. And looking at the presentation, I appreciate what you put together here. I see some things look like messaging, how we communicate with parents, how we talk about these issues. Some others look like, research and analysis. But then there's some others that the way they're described to me comes off as vague, and I'm not sure what they mean or what you're envisioning. When you talk, well, we'll have collaborations and we'll support initiatives. I mean, what really is that? Do you have like some sort of demonstrative example you can share for some sorts of, we talk about engaging, creating an engaging school climate. What sorts of things are we looking at as potential strategies or potential solutions in terms of like any sort of like descriptive action you can give me?
So nothing happens in isolation, and the last time I was here, I was talking about mental health. So that's an example of how we're going to be collaborating. Alliance Health, one of our biggest partners, is working on this with us too, because they know that those issues that they see feed into the students who are missing school. So that's one example. So we're doing things to continue to try to work with students who are in different facilities, make sure they're coming back to school, they're bridging back. We talked about that last time I was here. That's one example of a collaboration, working with our community partners that a school uses, churches, other agencies that they frequently go to for assistance. They can provide mentorship, things like that. The research is showing that when you collaborate with stakeholders, not just the parents and not just the teachers, but reaching out into the community, you're going to see a better payoff. So those are just a few examples of what we talk about when we need collaboration.
That helps. Sometimes just hearing it and being able to see what you're talking about helps a lot.
And I think as we dig into the data and look at trends of specific students, so we see here barriers, transportation, and it could vary, or housing. So it could very well be that we need to begin to look at our contracted transportation to figure out how we're going to get this child to school, because every day they're missing something. And so it just helps us think about how as a district are we more agile in, even if it's our McKinney-Vento liaison, how do we ensure that our practices within the district move quickly enough where a child had missed 10 days of school because of busing, or they moved from one location to another. And I think those are some of so looking at what can happen at the school level, what can happen at the student and family level, but also things that can happen at the district level when we can respond faster when it's bureaucratic things that may be building up absenteeism.
That helps. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes, I think I know the answer. Just to clarify, so I always talk about the many schools that I go to there ramp either start or to hear the outcomes, and I don't have one that doesn't have chronic absenteeism. And so again, much of this I've explained. So given we're bringing on a contractor, I'm curious of those schools who have had some successful outcomes. Maybe I should ask this question. How are you going to decide who you're interviewing? Because some of those schools have had some huge successes that would be, I believe, very useful. And again, most of those for me has been really how they integrate students back in the building with, of course, the supports from student services, which they do use as both intervention and prevention in those schools that I've seen successful outcomes.
Yep. So we don't want to just do a random sample of principals or schools. We do a representative sample. So one of the things we've looked at is having a good balance of schools that are struggling, schools that are successful with attendance. And we've looked at, again, a lot of different data points to be able to pull from that, to be able to get a good representative sample of the principals, of the staff in that school. I think we're going to be looking at that for every single group. But we want to look at not just the ones that are struggling the most and just focus on that. We need to learn from each, the schools that do have successes. I will say that one key ingredient is when you have a team at the school that is working together that includes administration, driving things. When all of those players are at the table and there's a clear message at the school that this is a priority, then we have success. Yep.
Thank you.
No, this is a topic that's very important. I just had to go through the presentation. I'm sorry I could not see the whole thing. I had to take care of the child who has chronic absences that I constantly work with. And so to hear the extraordinary work that you all are doing and the intentional work that you all are doing around trying to help parents and families recover academically from what they're missing is invaluable and extremely important. The only thing that I would even ask is, what would you all like to see parents do to be able to help with this, or what message, if you could, be able to say to parents who have the different root causes to give them hope or an outlook to say, I know this might be happening, but send them anyway. We'll take them as that safe space. What is the word, Dr. Wilson Norman? I think that they say within student services, when students have had a rough day, it's a message that they say to them. The teacher can say directly. I forgot the statement that we make. It's a beautiful statement that they say. It's that if kids have had a rough night prior to, I think the town of, is one of the sheriff departments or something tells them, I'm going to remember this, that they can just say to the students, be gentle or something. Or I can't remember the word that it is, but I think that's a wording and a model that we need to use when we know these are the root causes and the barriers, and when teachers, to make it a uniform thing. I'm going to find the right word that says, as is the chief of Apex, that says that he used it, and I think he's retired now as of this month. So, and I learned it from him and found out that in that region they actually do utilize those wordings to say to families or to students, when you've had a rough night, we knew that some things were going on that were not as helpful, the teachers then and administration then knows that however they might look, however they might be engaging in class, back up a little, handle them with care. Handle with care. And so they know just be a little bit different. And so I think that speaks highly to our children's social emotional. My kid needs that. I've had my kids teacher tell them that, and that's the first time I'd ever heard it. I thought it was the most amazing thing. It made me feel really great as a parent. It made me feel like that I wasn't failing, even though I can't help a chronic illness, but it made me feel seen, it made me feel heard, and it mostly made me feel supported, that my kid was going to be okay academically.
And that's the point, is not just educating them about why they need to be in school, but building that relationship.
Yeah.
I was just out of school a couple weeks ago. We were talking about with the principal about with this group that you've identified, what steps have you taken to try to build relationships with this group of families? And we brainstormed that. And then we came up with ways that they're going to try to implement that over the next few months and then measure it to see if there's any difference. But the building of the relationships is critical.
Right. And Roseville High, for me, does that exceptionally well. The staff at the base that understands the root cause, and other schools do it well too, that I've seen within my district. They do a really great job when they share that information around trying to talk to families directly with that. So thank you guys for this wonderful work that you're doing. It does resonate.
Thank you. And I want to point out that the way in which we think of this and approach it, moving from a truancy mindset to chronic absence, is what you're talking about. Because when they get that letter and it's a paragraph that is just legalese versus something that says, we want your child to be here.
That's the message, is we want you.
Yes.
We want you to come to school.
Yes.
No, I was just going to add that we now understand that this work has to be about how we engage with parents and help them to understand the things that we are actually putting in place to help them. I can tell you, after being in this business for 30 years, quite often teachers in schools are glad kids don't come to school. But if we go back to page 4, that shows the data about at the beginning, regardless of what the issue is, we want to say to a parent, when your child is absent these number of days or these number of days, this is the end result of missing out on a tremendous amount of school. And so we need them to be there. And so that is what I'm really pleased about, the shift that schools are making across the country, because this is a conversation that districts are having all over the place, and we recognize what the problem is. But the solution on our end does start with us saying that we've got to do something different on our end when we know they experience chronic absenteeism. The last thing I'll add is that what we always get, or what I've always gotten is, why don't they send them to court? Why don't they make that referral for educational neglect? And what you see time and time again is that unless it's something that's really bad, judges are going to be lenient, and they'll go through all of that work, and by the time they get to the end, it's May and school is about over. And so we've often got a lot of pushback about why we don't do that.
It's also a trauma for the student and family.
Absolutely. And so something that we don't want. We want to be doing this work that you're talking about.
I have spent years sitting in a courtroom for the same case. I also wanted to make sure I introduced Ms. Leah Frank, who's here with us today. She is our attendance and court liaison for the district, and if there's any questions about that, she is here to address it. And I also want to say, is there anything that I missed that you thought? Okay, just wanted to introduce Ms. Frank.
Thank you. I do believe that this would be a great topic. We talked about moving community engagement across the district and highlighting different topics. I really think this would be one that we should add to the list to really engage families, to really look through how we do our due diligence to ensure that every kid is in the building to receive quality education. So I would love for us to discuss what that looks like at that December meeting, potentially highlighting some of those schools that is seeing a very high level and bringing that meeting to that community so we can have conversations to figure out what those root causes are. I will say, I know we often use talking points quite a bit. Are we seeing that families are engaging more? Are front office staff encouraging families every year to update their information if they've changed their numbers and whatnot?
Yeah, it's one of the best tools. So when I got here about 4 years ago, I came during the pandemic, we were making a shift from being able to accept notes digitally instead of handwritten notes. And that was a big decision. But that's where we were during the pandemic, and we were heading that way anyway. Since then, it's not even the phone calls, because we still do phone calls, but we've learned that parents respond more to the talking points and texting than they do to even things when we call. It helps too, but it really is kind of the most preferred method to be able to reach out to families and get them engaged. Yeah.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, we have to do minutes because we didn't have a quorum.
Sorry.
My fault. It was me. You were good.
So, is there a motion? I would entertain a motion to approve the Student Achievement Committee meeting minutes from the October 8th meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Edmonds and seconded by Chair Hegarty. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes pass, and we are going to adjourn this meeting at 4:06. We'll look forward to
I think we approved it because I just signed it.